What's going on, everybody? We have a special guest here. It's Matthew Weaver, covers Indiana for Peaks.com and 24/7 Sports Network. Here to talk about Zach Carpenter, Miami's newest center transfer. We're going to break down his game. Matthew, interesting career. Starts at Michigan, 2 years, 3 years at Indiana. What would you kind of say just in totality about Zach, his ability as a center? He has a lot of experience. We'll kind of break it all down, but just in totality, kind of what kind of player is Miami getting here?
He's a solid player. I think I know he's being brought in to play center down there, but he does have experience at guard. He's got versatility. It was interesting last year. He was the starter at center, and in pregame warmups, it was like the second or third game of the season. He injured his hand and was not able to snap. Missed a couple of games, and when he came back, they moved him to guard because the inability to snap the ball. And I think he started working as a snapper with his left hand. I believe he was a right-handed snapper, and now he snaps left-handed. Even now that his hand is okay. So it was interesting how he kind of adjusted. Like I said, I know he's a center, but if they ever needed him to move down there to one of the guard spots, he can do that. He's been a quality player for Indiana. Like you said, started at Michigan. They recruited him hard out of high school. He almost went to IU out of high school. I think he's from, I would say Cincinnati Moeller, I believe is where he went to high school. Um, Came over after a couple year or two at Michigan and was, a rock, a stalwart on the Indiana offensive line that struggled last year, but got better after they made a coaching change at that position. And they were much improved this year under Bob Bostad.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the left-handed stuff. I remember years ago kind of asking an offensive line coach about that. Is it a big difference if a center snaps left-handed? Because I think, we don't see it very often. And really just what I was told is it doesn't really matter. I mean, essentially every snapper, every center has their own style anyways. So every quarterback doesn't have to get used to that anyways. And, if it matters more, I guess, if you're under center a lot, but if you're going shotgun, it's just about how it comes out and getting used to it. And we've seen this at Miami. We saw it last year with the backup center and Jonathan Dennis, who's left-handed. So we've seen it just recently. So that is interesting. Maybe what you've seen from him at the center spot. Again, Miami's expecting him to play center. As you mentioned, Matt Lee moves on. They had great success there with Matt Lee transfer from UCF. And they've got three guys back on the starting offensive line. Jalen Rivers made the announcement. He's back at left tackle, Francis Mauigoa at right tackle, and then also Inez Cooper. So they've got some experience in the way Zach fits in. Let's talk about Zach when he got to IU. Maybe the adjustment, because he's going to do this again. I think when players have already been through an adjustment period, it can certainly help transferring again. What do you remember about Zach kind of when he first arrived from Michigan, kind of battling for a spot there?
I think when I watch him on the practice field, he's an athletic guy. He's got good feet. I remember at least around us, he's a good interview, kind of a quiet guy, but I think he's like one of those guys that kind of maybe leads more by example. Sure, he's more vocal maybe in the locker room and stuff, but I don't think the fit. Well, I think it'll be seamless. He's like you said, he's done it before, and obviously, Michigan's a big time program. Comes Indiana, which is in the Big Ten, not as high level, but still a Big Ten program. And then obviously Miami down there, that's a big time program. So I think it'll be a good fit. He came in, like I said, he was a new guy, immediately kind of worked his way into the rotation, played guard and center that first year, more guard than center, and then kind of took over that center spot, after that season and had kind of been the guy until he got hurt. And then even came back and played last year towards the end of the year and obviously this year. So he's a good player. Like I said, athletic, really good feet, moves well. I can see them, maybe using him as a guy who pulls and stuff. I don't know what Miami likes to do. I don't watch him as much, but he can get out in space and pull and maybe get down and be that guy that you kind of gets down the field on certain run plays. So I think it's a really good pickup for Miami. And I think he's a mature guy. And I think his transition will be no problem at all for him.
Yeah, certainly. Miami would like to. We saw it a little bit this year. They want to move their centers around their guard. They'd like to be able to have guys that can pull. He's listed at 6'5", 295 last year. You've touched on his experience, and that's what stands out. He had over 800 snaps last year. He's a guy that's played a lot. I'm curious about, and I think you keep mentioning the Big Ten and how he's at Michigan, but Indiana they're playing a tough schedule. He's played, the last 2 years. He's played Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State in each of the last 2 years. And I think that experience in big games and on the road, I think that can certainly help any team, especially on the offensive line there. Anything that stands out to you about Indiana's offense when they've played those bigger games? Obviously, it's been, not getting the result, but just those games in particular, how the offense has done, maybe with Zach and his leadership, because obviously you're pointing to a center, handling a lot of that responsibility to try to, keep the offense going there.
Well, one thing is, Indiana, they made a change, but Walt Bell was here before, and Walt Bell runs a really up tempo. So he's a guy that he's played really up tempo. So if, I don't, if Miami wants to play fast, he's done that where basically you just line up and keep snapping the ball. And they've also played where they slow it down. So, he's kind of been in that kind of an offense. I thought the O line was really, really poor at the start last year. And it's not, it was more about they just weren't, that's why they made a coaching change. They made the coaching change. New O line coach came in who was already on the staff as a consultant, and they immediately got better and really played much better towards the end of the year. And then this year they were much improved. And he was a big part of it. That is the veteran offensive line that Indiana had, and he was the guy that to me the center. He handles the ball. The only guy who handles the ball more than him is the quarterback, or as much. So he's to me the quarterback of the offense. And I thought Zach did a great job at Indiana. Kind of being that leader in the middle. And being that quarterback of the offense. And I think one of the biggest reasons why they improved was because, the kind of leader he was, the kind of performance he gave, and, the things that he did on the field. In the big games, they had some good moments. I mean, the offense struggled early. That's why they changed OC this year, but they got a lot better as the season went along, had some of their best offensive games in the second half of the season. And the O-line was a big part of it. They did a good job protecting and did a pretty good job in the run game, for this for the Indiana offense.
Let's stay with that the quarterback connection. He's worked with a lot of different guys. What can you explain? Maybe some of the guys he worked with, their styles, and obviously that connection is always big with the quarterback center exchange and developing that connection, which I thought. Miami would have liked to have had better quarterback play throughout the entire season, but I thought Matt Lee did a good job stepping in there. So, what can you say about Zach and his connection with the quarterback during his time at IU?
Yeah, Indiana's had kind of a revolving door, so I may miss some guys that he's worked with because they've had a bit of a revolving door. So in 21, that would have been Michael Penix is actually last year at Indiana. He was more of a guard that year, but Michael Penix played. Jack Tuttle, who transferred to Michigan this year, played was the backup there. Donovan McCulley, who's now a receiver at Indiana. So worked with guys. 2022 last year, it was mainly Connor Bazelak, who transferred in from Missouri. During the season, he got banged up, so they made a switch at quarterback. So he worked with Tuttle again. I'm trying to think who else. Dexter Williams towards the end of the year. So he's had experience working with multiple guys. This year, it was Indiana basically had a quarterback competition for the first 3 or 4 games of the season. They kept it going into the season. They rotated Taven Jackson and Brendan Sorsby. So he has a lot of experience working with multiple guys, which I think is obviously huge because injuries happen. I know them down there. I think you guys have some different quarterbacks. It's all over the country. You got to be able to work with different guys. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think that's something that will really give him an advantage. The fact that he's had so many different voices that he's had to work with and guys that maybe play a little bit different. I think that's another thing that's going to make the transition really easy for him, no matter who's the quarterback is down there for the Canes.
And going back to Michigan, he would have worked with different quarterbacks there as well. And back in high school, and kind of we touched on Moeller a little bit. People that don't know, it's usually a big time program there, and they've obviously produced a lot of recruits. As a 2019 recruit, he was a 3-star prospect back then, according to 24/7 Sports composite rankings. Running the ball, Miami wants to run the ball. That's just what they want to do. They'd obviously like even more success running the ball. Zach's gonna, jump in and be a big factor in that with wanting to, impose physicality, all of these things with running the ball. How has IU's running game been? And is there anything that you could stand out with maybe how Zach's influence with the run game there?
Yeah, Indiana's line this year, they were more of a finesse line, and that's not to say that Zach can't be a physical player, but I think as a group, they just weren't that kind of physical dominant. So their running game was more about trying to maybe move some guys, pull guys, and I think that's where he'll be really good. I'm not saying he can't be a physical guy and push guys down the field, but like I said, he's an athletic guy. He moves well. When he gets out in space, he seems like he's comfortable in space. Some linemen they got in space, they don't seem like they're comfortable. So, but like I said, Indiana, they were just more that they the coaches did schemes and run plays that played to their strengths, or at least they tried to, and that was more trying to get guys, do some stuff where you pulled guys and things like that. So I think he'll be fine in any kind of scheme, but definitely if they want to get him in space, I think he'll be really comfortable doing that.
And this will be year six overall in college for him. Year over year, his PFF grades are better this year than they were a year ago. What kind of improvements, and we'll kind of leave it on this of just like, what to expect at Miami. Essentially, is this an improving player? Did you see some things that were a little bit better that he did this year than even when he first arrived, or just kind of where his progress is in his development as a player? I know he's going to be 23 when season starts, but, just how he's kind of developed year over year and just his time at IU.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen him improve. And like I said, when he first came in, and I can't remember who the center. Indiana had kind of guy at center, so he was playing more guard. But you could see the improvement. And when they lost him last year, early in the season, it was a loss because they had to go to a very young player, that guy struggled. And I mean, losing Zach was a big loss. I mean, it was. I'm not sure what he did. It happened in pregame warmups, but he had some kind of hand injury, like I said. And it really affected the O line because he was a centerpiece of the O line. He had really started to come on at center. You could see him growing in that spot. And then when he came back, they played better. And I thought this year he played, like you said, the grades kind of bear it out. He was playing at a pretty high level. So, I think you saw a guy as he got more snaps. I think you said he was over 800 snaps this year. As you got more snaps, like anybody, the more reps you get, the more time on task you get, the better you're going to get at something. That's what I saw, and I think his best football, even though it's a 6 year, his best football is still ahead of him, in my opinion, just because. This was the first year where he was really the full time center all season. And I think that's going to really bode well for his time at Miami next year.
Yeah, that's great stuff, Matthew. Your time is very valuable. I know people really appreciate this kind of insight and really kind of dive into Zach here and players that transfer to Miami. So I appreciate it. Hopefully you have good holidays and thanks for your time.
Yeah, you too. Have a great Christmas and New Year.